So, funny story. 6 weeks ago, we were organizing our annual Tales of Terror show. And we're talking, figuring out what we're going to do, et cetera. And Becca asked, what are you going to write for the intro? And I'm like, I just can't think of it. I'm like, whatever. We'll figure it out, Becca. And it was our anniversary. Our anniversary is an awesome day. Typically, we go out and do something fun in the mountains that afternoon and kind of stay out till dark instead of going out to a nice dinner. That's how we roll. It was the first nice, crisp fall day, and so we headed out to go do this sizable mountain bike ride. It's just this perfect day to be in the woods. It's sunny. We're chatting on the ride up, laughing, having a good time. We're rolling through, nice forests and into these clear cuts and then fireweeds going off. And then all of a sudden we roll into this fog bank. The temperature drops and we leave the clear cuts with all the wonderful wildflowers and we roll into this deeper, darker forest. And there's this spot on the trail. There's a natural stopping point, an obvious place before you do a big downhill to pull over, grab some water, eat some food, and regroup. The trail we're about to go is called No Service. It's sort of this playful reminder that there's no cell coverage out there and that you're 10 miles away from the trailhead at that stage. So you're on your own. There's no help. Can't do anything out there. So we sit down and, we're having a good time talking and going through. And I look past Becca and I've clearly seen something super disturbing. And in my head, I'm like, this cannot be happening. You've just got to be kidding me. This is not what I had in mind when we said we'd figure out the intro to the Tales of Terror. The goal is not to be in the Tales of Terror. And I'm like, oh my God. I keep talking to Becca and I'm like, I'm going to look again. See if that really is what I thought it was. No. I am freaking out. And Becca, I think she can tell at this stage something's changed. Maybe my face has gone white. And clearly, the hair on the back of my neck is standing up. And I say to Becca, turn around. Do you see what I see? And she looks, and I can tell by the way her head snaps back that she sees it too. In the dark understory of the woods, 100 feet away from us, is a man, a figure, arms outstretched, face shrouded by a hood. I look again. There was a little brief moment where I thought, should I turn on the recorder on the phone, the voice memos, right now and sort of narrate this through? And I'm like, nope, that would be clearly a bad idea. That would be breaking some sort of law of the universe, or at least law of Tales of Terror universe. I looked again. No movement. Just a steadiness. Menace. Staring straight towards us. He's not moving, Becca. We summoned the courage to look a little longer and study the ominous figure. The hooded rain jacket had been draped over a small tree. Branches inserted into the arms provided structure. We laughed nervously. We were 10 miles from the trailhead, and the scarecrow had done its job. I looked at Becca. Should we go? Definitely. And just like that, we were gone, moving as quickly away before we could think of the next question. Who had made it? Why would anyone want to put in the effort to scare people that just want to have a good time, that want to enjoy the woods? What kind of evil mind would do this? Today, we bring you 3 stories of looming darkness. You have been warned. Welcome to the annual edition of Tales of Terror. I'm Fitz Cahall. You're listening to the Dirtbag Diaries.
When I was in high school, my mom and I flew out from California to New England for a week of exploring back roads, quaint college towns. We embarked on the road trip not just to seek out a place for me to spend the next 4 years, but also to spend some uninterrupted, quality time together before I made my way off into adulthood. With a tight itinerary, we spent several late nights driving through unlit back roads, under swinging stoplights, and passing quiet towns with darkened windows until we reached a place to stay. Usually, that meant a place too close to the Bates Motel for comfort. Having grown up in San Diego, I was not accustomed to thick woods or creaking old houses. I marveled at the forest and surrounding landscape. I also reckoned much of it was haunted. From a young age, I've had interactions with what I can only describe as things beyond our world. From my late grandfather's locked cabinet swinging open next to me, to my skirt being tugged by what felt like the hand of a child on a tour of a haunted house. I never felt threatened or scared. The things I interacted with always felt peaceful and trustworthy. We didn't plan to stay long in Ithaca, New York, but after 7 schools and 3 days, I begged my mom to make a pit stop at one of Ithaca's famous waterfalls. After picking a random trailhead on the car's GPS, my mom ushered me out of the car and encouraged me to go on my own. Be quick! I hopped out and started along the 3-mile trail. A damp, low-hanging fog clung to the trees and the soil. The temperature dropped, getting nippier as I neared the river. The ground was covered in rotted leaves, long fallen from the bare branches above. I often hike alone, but something about these woods made me uneasy. I shoved my worries down and kept ascending the overgrown path. The growing roar of water, cascading over rocks, indicated that I was headed in the right direction. But as I reached the falls, I realized we clearly weren't sent to the main trailhead. The main trail, it seemed, was unreachable across the massive gorge before me. This trail ended at a crumbling stone wall that overlooked the waterfall and the rocky, icy cliff below. I peeked over the ledge, took some pictures, and some videos. The moment I turned around to leave, I froze. Someone was watching me. I tried to coax myself forward, but I was held captive by a growing sense of dread. The feeling of terror, death, and darkness swept over me. My eyes darted around, trying to spot something out of place, something moving, but the air was dead. No breeze, no flutter of bird wings, no scurry of a squirrel. It felt like a lifetime before a new sensation demanded my attention. A figure, tall and looming, creeping up behind me, but how? My back was to the torrent water in the jagged gorge, and no sound of footsteps broke the silence. But still, I felt it come closer. The hair stood up on the back of my neck as I felt it lower next to my ear. I thought to turn and look, but I still couldn't move, and didn't necessarily want to. I knew that whatever it was not human. Completely enshrouded by this mass, I was held in place by anticipation, and then it happened. In my right ear, clear as day. At the moment those words were spoken, I was released, and I fled. I tore up the hill, slipping and clawing over leaves and brush. I didn't look back, didn't think. I just ran to the car. Imaginary walls, some terrible foe were closing in on me, and I pushed myself a little harder. Run. The car was in sight. I jumped in, slammed the door, and screamed, "Drive!" My mom scrambled for her keys and hit the gas. As we fled down the road, flanked on either side by woods that oozed dread, she stoically looked at me and said, "You look like you've seen a ghost." Bewildered, she asked me what happened, but I couldn't talk. You see, the tone of its androgynous, static, disembodied voice, the snarky way it uttered those words, and the oppressive presence it carried, screamed one thing. It wanted to scare me. I feared that if I told her, it could follow us and do something worse. I knew in my heart that it was evil. In only 2 syllables, whatever that thing was sent a message that I'd never forget.
That was Emma Palmer. And yes, that is terrifying. Next up, we head to Alaska, where our producer and longtime collaborator Evan Phillips goes to climb a mountain. That ice axe is going to come in handy.
I believe it was August or September of 1993. I was 18 years old, and this is when I was first been exposed to the outdoors. I had met this group of young guys. We had all been in trouble in high school. So I had met a couple of these guys in like a behavioral drug and alcohol treatment facility. We'd basically gone through like what they used to call like a Hoods in the Woods program, and it changed our lives. I hadn't really done any like serious mountain climbing up to this point, but I wanted to. So we headed up about 2.5 hours northwest of Anchorage into the Talkeetna Mountains. We wanted to go climb a mountain called Mount Monarch. It's about a 7,000 foot mountain, non-technical, but a beautiful mountain in a wilderness setting. All we knew is that it would be an adventure. So we left in the evening because when we got there in the dark. And the plan was to hike in as far as we could, camp, climb the mountain the next day, and hike out. We got there, and we started hiking in the dark. Everything was going good. We're laughing. We're having fun. You know, we're young kids. Like, we're just having a good time, just being young dudes hanging out. And we get to this, what seemed like an alder patch. It was really dark. And we're on, like, a muddy ATV trail. And I remember we stopped, and like one of my buddies was like, dude, there's eyes. You could see eyes glowing off our headlamps. You know, we didn't know what it was. And then we saw another set of eyes on the other side of the trail. They weren't really moving. They weren't making a lot of noise. So we all held hands and we just walked right through the middle of them together.
That moment where you see those eyes, like, do you remember the hair standing up on your neck or anything like that?
I know what you're trying to do here. I mean, honestly, like, yeah, it was spooky seeing those eyes pop through the alders. This was kind of a spooky place in general, but we're trying to get to where we're going. And the way we're going to do this, 4 young guys wanting to be tough decided to hold hands and walk through them together.
What happened next?
We made it through the creepy eyes, and, you know, we're walking by headlamp, and we're just kind of making our way up this trail. Don't really know where we're going. None of us have been here, but we're just kind of on a faint trail. Did a little bushwhacking. And I just think that we ended up making camp just in a little bit of a clearing that night, and went to sleep, and we're getting ready for our next day to go try and tackle this mountain. So we wake up the next day. I remember it being like a really beautiful, like a fall morning, you know, like the colors are changing. It's a little crisp in the air. You know, it's beautiful. It's inspiring. And we were excited. You know, we're going on this adventure. So we keep heading up this trail, and this is like really beautiful country. You kind of get up over this ridge and you look down, and it's almost like there's a big, beautiful pass that runs down there. You could tell that this was like, there was glaciers that covered this way back in the day, because there's lots of kind of rolling hills and open valleys and some really rugged peaks in the distance, but no like pinnacles or any like spires or anything. But so we make our way up this valley, and, you know, we kind of make our way up under Mount Monarch Peak. There was like a lake. I remember there was a little lake there under it. We didn't know what way to go up. It looked like there was a bunch of options. It was really windy that day, like constant wind with big gusts, maybe 20 to 30 mile an hour wind. And we just kind of started making our way up this peak. At one point in time, one of the guys, Brant, I think we were going kind of slow and we were being like kind of cautious. And he's like, man, I'm going to go climb this thing on my own. So he takes off close to the top. And we're like, well, I guess we'll meet up with Brant later, you know? We end up, for whatever reason, are like, yeah, this is as high as we're going to go. We kind of get to the base and we're waiting for Brant. He ends up kind of coming down and meeting us. He's like, yeah, I went around the backside and summited. So, you know, we're like, well, good for you, man. I guess you're the climber out of the four of us. We're heading down, and it was so windy that, like, we were basically having to yell to talk to each other. We kind of get into this divot, this kind of hole. It almost was like, it seemed like a kettle lake that was left from a glacier had once been in this hole, because it was literally just a divot. And we were able to go down in this and get out of the wind. And we're just down there, like, taking a break, probably eating, like, power bars or something. And we're just talking. And then all of a sudden, one of my buddies goes, guys, look up. And we look up, probably about 150 feet above us is a lone head of, you know, what appeared to be a dog type animal. You couldn't tell. You could just see the silhouette of it. And it's just its head poked up. We're looking at this thing, and then all of a sudden, like 10 seconds later, maybe about 50 feet off to the left, another head pops up. And then we're just like, oh, dude, there's another one. And then all of a sudden, in between those two, another head pops up. And then another, and another, and another. And at this time, like, we're looking at each other, we're like, dude, this is a pack of wolves. We're teenagers. We don't know anything about wolves. We don't know anything about the outdoors. We're total rookies. All we have with us are ice axes. Like, what are we going to do? Like, we're surrounded by wolves. And I just remember we're all gripping, death grip around our ice axes. We all just got quiet. And we just sat there and we just stared at these wolves that were staring right back at us. It feels like it lasted like a couple minutes. This probably lasted 30 seconds. I've been in a couple of, like, near-death experiences in my climbing career. One of which was crossing a river, you know, and I got swept away. It was one of those times where you see your life flash in front of your eyes. That happened to me, and I remember being like, wow, that's what it must feel like when you feel like maybe you're about to die. You know, the other experience I've had is, you know, getting caught in an avalanche. Same thing. I mean, just your life flashes in front of your eyes like, this is it. And I don't remember if that happened, but I remember just feeling like this, like, fear of, like, this is out of my control. I mean, if these wolves want to come get us, we have no way to defend ourselves other than these ice axes. I think what happened is just kind of a collective calm just came over us. I think we were just in awe that we were, like, having this moment with these wolves. This probably lasted about a minute. And I think, like, the first 15 or 20 seconds, we were panicking. Because we knew, like, I mean, if they come down here and, like, come after us, like, they're going to win.
Yeah. How many were there?
I think there was, like, 6.
Uh-huh.
And then after about, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, the first one that had popped up, its head just pops down and it disappears. And then a few seconds later, another one disappears. And another one disappears, and another one disappears. And another one disappears, and another one disappears. And we just looked at each other and just, like, burst out laughing. Just like we're screaming, like, we were just surrounded by a pack of wolves in Alaska. Like, I mean, I don't know how they make their decisions, but, this was hunting season. So there was, like, herds of caribou going through there. There's moose. So these wolves were out hunting. Yeah. And there was something about the group of us that they were like, we're not going to mess with them.
Or there was something about earlier, they were like, maybe we can mess with them.
Yeah, like, I guess in hindsight, like, they could have been stalking us all day.
They probably were. Like, when you think about it, like, the fact that you guys were just like out in the open and then you ditch into this like a hunting terrain trap, it totally makes me think that they probably were aware of you way longer before you were aware of them.
I've had a lot of amazing wildlife encounters in Alaska. You know, all of these experiences, when I think back, those are vivid memories, just these interactions with the animals and stuff. That's how I feel about the wolf encounter. It was like those experiences, as scary as they are, they were part of just this like rich tapestry of life that I lived for many years of my life. And it's pretty cool to look back and be like, man, I was surrounded by a pack of wolves in Alaska.
After the break, we dig up one of the most haunting tales of terror of all time. Jeremy Allen takes us into the dark heart of the Cascades. Hey everyone, it is that time of year. We need your shorts, your stories, because you power this show. We hear from so many of you that one day you're going to submit your short and send it to us at the Diaries. Guess what? That moment, it could be right now. So make it a New Year's goal or use it as an excuse to take a break from Uncle Joe at the holidays. You make this community, your voice is valued. You can find all the information you need at our website, dirtbagdiaries.com. Click on the Write Us tab where you can find instructions and the submission form. Pay attention to it. It helps the cause. Trust me. Link is in the show notes, so take a moment, click on it, consider it, and then get to work. You've got until January 19th to send us your short. Once again, it's dirtbagdiaries.com/write us. Thanks. Do you have a resolution to adventure outdoors more this year? Make it happen with Sierra Club Outings. Leaders in conservation-focused active outdoor adventures, Sierra Club Outings hosts over 250 small group trips every year where you can backpack, kayak, raft, volunteer, and more. These trips fill up fast, so reserve your spot at sierraclub.org/outings and use the code DIRTBAG to get $100 off. With Sierra Club Outings, it's more than just a trip. It's an adventure with a cause. We'll put a link in the show notes. Check out all the incredible trips they have and make that resolution happen.
It was kind of another experience in a string of previous experiences and stuff that happened in the future that surround this one area in the Upper Baker Lake drainage. It scared the shit out of me. So around the year 2000, I was living in the small town of Marble Mount, Washington, in the North Cascades National Park. And my girlfriend at the time, Jeannie, was a geologist working for the park. And I just started guiding out of a guide service in Bellingham, Washington. And it's a great place to be in the spring months and those summer months, but in the winter you're definitely marooned. And so I was poking around trying to find places to ski tour and in the area, and I'd been going out kind of in this pretty remote area between Mount Baker and Mount Shuckson quite a lot, and there's a kind of a burly little switchbacky Forest Service road, and I rallied up that for a bit, but then quickly got bogged down and parked the truck and started skiing, and clearly no one had been up there for a number of weeks. There was no tracks, ski or foot traffic. Not really a place that anyone but climbers or skiers tends to go. I skied up a road for maybe an hour or so, and then I started to go cross country into this small mountain range, kind of working my way up through this mature forest And I had my head down, and I was, I had pretty ambitious plans that day. I don't really remember exactly how far I intended to go, but I wanted to try to poke out into the kind of the western flanks of Mount Blum. So significant uh, distance to travel. And I was touring kind of through this forested area. So I was kind of concentrating on just what was in front of my skis. And then at one point, I remember kind of just feeling a little bit tense and uneasy. And I looked up, and I had this kind of like an auditory hallucination almost, where if you're in a movie, the soundtrack would just go wah 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 wah, and all around me were all these things hanging from the trees, like tinsel and silverware and sticks, like big sticks, small sticks, moss, like hung up with twine. There were some dolls, like Raggedy Ann dolls, really ragged looking. Big bones, not chicken bones or anything like that. One bone that it could have been an animal bone. I don't really know what a femur in a human looks like, but big bones. I looked up, and I kind of spun around, and I stopped, and I did a 360, and there was this wah 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 wah, and then the light was kind of shining through the trees, and it was picking up all these reflections, and I just instantly freaked out. I started to rip my skins off, and then I stopped, and I remember thinking, what the hell is this? And I took a closer look, and the area was extensive. I'm not talking about a couple trees, and hundreds of things. It would have taken a group of people a really long time to set this scene up. And I just decided that I didn't want to keep going, so I just ripped my skins off, and I hightailed out of there. And the whole time I just felt like I was being watched. So I don't know what it was. I think probably it was some sort of pagan ritual site. It looked like it had been there for a while, which kind of freaked me out, because how that could be, something that extensive, how it could be that in that place for so long, I think is really odd. Yeah, I'm not sure. So this is probably 2 or 3 years after this. The Baker Lake headwaters are more remote parts of the western North Cascades, and my partner and another staff member from the park have been working in the Upper Baker Lake area, and they were on, I think it was a 3 to 4 day trip, where they went up to the head of the lake in a canoe, and then they had waders, and they were doing a lot of landform mapping in the aquatic zone, and then deep up into the head of the river. And so they spent a lot of time bushwhacking and traveling like through water. They went up about a day, probably like 15 miles or so, and then made a camp, and the next day they kept going. And at some point during the morning, apparently they encountered this sandbank and kind of a gravel bar area, and they found 2 graves dug into the sand, gravestone made out of sticks, I believe, and rocks, kind of mounded over, big human-sized graves. And they told me that I heard the story, when they got back, that they felt like they had been watched this whole trip. And keep in mind that these are, full-on science-minded people, very practical, not prone to superstition. And for them to come back, Jeannie was completely beside herself. Like, she just couldn't wait to tell me, and she was still buzzing. Because what happened later on when they traveled back through that area is that they went back and there were 2 more graves at this point without headstones on them, and they were just holes in the ground, and they were dug right next to the previous 2. Don't you think that certain areas lend themselves to scary stories and superstition and weirdness? And a lot of my time in the mountains, I've lived out here for 25 years, and I've poked around a lot of deep and dark nooks and crannies of the range, and really consider myself to be a Cascadian. And one of the things that tends to keep me on my toes and freak me out more than exposure or technical difficulty or weather or anything like that are these low elevation, deep, dark, secluded areas where all sorts of stuff goes on. I've been back and poked around in that area since, and I'm always on edge, and I'm always wondering what weird thing I'm going to see next. But I honestly feel like I've avoided it.
Thank you, Emma, Evan, and Jeremy, for terrorizing us. Seriously, it's going to be a lot harder to go out into the woods this weekend and not be looking over my shoulder. Special shout out to all the listeners who become members of Diaries Plus. Thank you. We are feeling the love. And you're making it possible for us to keep putting out new episodes. If you're interested in becoming a member, there's a link in the show notes. Because, we really want to do a Tales of Terror next year. I think. Hopefully I'm not too scared. Music today from Kiangle, Field, Squarewave, Trove, Bamtone, Aidan Baker, and David Beer. The tracks are courtesy of the artists, Free Music Archive, or Track Club. Jacob Bain and Nis Koto composed our theme song. You can find links to the artists at our website, dirtbagdiaries.com. Our stories come from friends of friends, and from you. If you have a compelling idea for a guest or story lead, please give us a shout. You can use the submission form on our website. This episode was produced by Skylar Perwins with additional production help from me. Illustration by Walker Cahal. Fitz Cahal is our creative director. I'm Becca Cahal, filling in for Fitz, and you've been listening to the Dirtbag Diaries. Thanks for tuning in.